Ohio State went through its first day of fall camp practice and preparation for the 2024 season. I'm Stephen Means. That's Andrew Gillis. Andrew, you watched the defense on Thursday morning. What stood out? What was an interesting thing that you saw from the defense?
Well, as we walked off the field, I looked at one of the other writers, and they said, "What's your main takeaway, Gillis? What do you think?" And I said, "I think they might be too good to learn much of anything this fall camp." And I was kind of half joking, and I'm also kind of not. Because the big thing we learned today, at least for me, was that Sonny Styles was working as the will linebacker. He was working next to Cody Simon. We had talked all fall camp. Spring practice. We had talked in the lead up to fall camp. Who's going to be that guy next to Cody Simon? Who's going to be that guy that Ohio State wants there? And at least for today, it was Sonny Styles. So CJ Hicks was running with the twos. He was with Gabe Powers. So that's your starting linebacking core on August 1st. Now, they don't play a game for 30 days. They don't play a game, no offense to Akron and Western Michigan and Marshall. No, they don't play a game that matters really until the end of September. And they don't play a game that really matters until a week and two after that when you play Iowa and Oregon. So you've got time to figure this out. That was my number one thing that I noticed, because I think that kind of is indicative of maybe where they feel, or how they feel about Sonny Styles and kind of what he can bring to that linebacking core. Because again, got experience. He's played in the secondary. I think they like his coverage ability. That was kind of the thing with Tommy and Steel Chambers, Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers. You have a guy who can cover, a guy who can run maybe a little bit, and you got Tommy Eichenberg as your Mike. You have that. Everything else, it was very hard to discern today because the front seven, they're not in pads. Like, you can't really learn anything from pads. The front four was exactly what you'd expect it to be. Jack Sawyer, JT Tumaloa were your ends. Tylee Williams and Ty Hamilton were on the interior. The second team defensive line, the same thing. You had Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry were your ends. Tywan Malone and Caden McDonald were up the middle. We're going to see rotations here, so don't read too much into that right now, as you get into the second, especially second and third team. So don't read too much into that right now. There's a lot of depth chart stuff. Jermaine Matthews was in the slot. Yeah. I thought that was interesting. You have Aaron Scott, Calvin Simpson-Hunt, and Jermaine Matthews now as your second kind of cornerback trio. I, tongue-in-cheek standing, I do a lot of bits, if you couldn't tell by the way that I'm talking about this. I was standing there watching practice, and I looked at some guys, and I went, that trio, Calvin Simpson-Hunt, Jermaine Matthews, Aaron Scott, how many Big Ten programs is that a starting trio? And the answer is not zero. So that's where Ohio State's secondary room is right now, and I think that kind of gets to the crux of today. You knew where a lot of the starters were going to be. The only real question was who's going to start at will. You knew that a lot of these guys were going to look physically impressive, and we're going to learn more as things go. The offense was good. Carnell Tate made a lot of plays. Jeremiah Smith made a lot of plays. Go watch our other video about the offense. You're going to learn more about that. But those drills are kind of geared towards the offense, especially when pads aren't on, especially when it's 7-on-7 and there's no pass rush, and all those things kind of exist. So this defense is going to be very good, and I came into today and went, yep, this was just my visual reminder and my visual checkpoint of, yeah, this defense is really good, because they've got the first team that you kind of knew was already going to be really good. Then you map out the second team and go, man, a lot of these dudes are starters elsewhere.
Jermaine Matthews being a nickel stood out to me because he was doing it a little bit in the spring. So the fact that he's still doing it in the fall means they've got options at nickel there, and maybe we'll see some different looks this year, right? We see some dime looks this year where you've got Denzel Burke and Davidson Ignosin on the outside while you've got Jordan Hancock and Jermaine Matthews on the interior. You mentioned the CJ Hicks thing, him working with the twos. Let's see when they put some pads on.
Let's wait.
It's in – James Laurinaitis has some options in that room. It's going to be interesting to see how he deploys them. I think what you saw today was two guys who will play football working with the ones, and it feels like maybe Sonny Styles has figured out linebacker, and he's also played football. That's where you go first with the trust. But if over the next 30 days CJ Hicks gets consistent, because that's the word that keeps getting thrown around with him, what does that do for James Laurinaitis in terms of how he goes about using those options? Get the text 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. We'll be out there for a couple more practices watching Ohio State as they prepare for the 2024 season. And go find Buckeye Talk wherever you listen to podcasts.